When I was 2 years old, my mom gave me to my grandparents to raise me. My stepdad was a pimp, and he had 12 girls, and he used to drive a cab to transport his girls around. And my mom was like the girl he fell in love with. And they were drug addicts. And so in my mom's attempt to give me a better life, she gave me to my grandparents, and they raised me. I remember where it all began. I was riding on the lawnmower for a long time with my dad that day. I went to jump off the lawnmower and I put my hand down on the muffler. When I put my hand down on the muffler, I mean, it just scalded my hand. And I remember crying all night. And then my mom, she really got tired of, seeing me suffer. And she was like, they tried everything. And she's told my dad, just take him to your cousin. And so he took me, and I was scared of her. I remember being very afraid to go to her. And when he handed her my hand, I remember feeling her breath on my hand, saying some words, but I never heard what she said. And at that moment, I felt the burning just leave out of my hand. And there, looking back now, I know what happened. And while she healed me, I believe there was a transfer. I believe a spirit came in. We went on a Cub Scout camping trip. Sometime in the middle of the night, I got out of the tent and I walked down into the water. And as I was about waist deep into the water, some camper came, scooped me up out of the water. And I remember waking up and being, delusional and not knowing what was happening. And now looking back, I really see that the enemy was after my life from that moment forward. Not too long after that, my parents got a divorce. They took me away from my dad. And from there, this streak, this rebelliousness began to rise up in me. By the time I'm 12 years old, I quit going to school. I started getting high, started smoking weed, cigarettes, methamphetamine, crack cocaine. It all began 12 years old. It just continued. I got in a gang, and by the time I'm 16 years old, I commit armed robbery. I rob a drug dealer, and they hold me till I'm 17, charge me as an adult, and they're trying to give me 20 years in prison. We pay for a lawyer, and because I was a juvenile, they then suspended my sentence, and I ended up doing 5 years in prison. So I went in when I was 16, I got out when I was 21. When I got out of prison, I was worse off then than I ever been in my life. If I thought I was a convict, if I thought I was a womanizer, if I thought I was a con man, it was just amplified at that point. I'm a real criminal now. I was a monster, When I got out, I had such a rage, such a hatred in my heart toward people that I didn't care about anyone. I was as hard-hearted as you could possibly be. When I got out of prison, I met this girl, and we started shooting up dope, and I was putting a needle in my arm 10, 15 times a day. My homeboy, best friend at the time, when I got out of jail, he had 18 keys. And so when I came out of prison, we just jumped right back into it as if nothing ever happened. And I started putting a needle in my arm 10, 15 times a day. Here, it was about 3 o'clock in the morning. I've been up 10 days on these drugs. I had to take one of my friends home. So I took him. On the way back, sure enough, got blue lighted, ran from the police, ran 2 red lights, 2 stop signs, pulled up in my homeboy's driveway, and jumped out of the car, threw the keys in the floorboard, just in time for the police to pull up and not know who was driving. They come to the yard and they say, hey, there was a white male with a white shirt driving this white truck. Who was it? And it was 5 of us. All 5 of us were white and had white t-shirts on. And so they couldn't identify the person who was driving. And so they were really upset. They began to call in each name to see if someone had a warrant for their arrest at their last attempt to take somebody to jail. And I knew I had warrants. And so took off running. And as I took off running, they tased me. And then the taser didn't really work at first. And so once they caught me, they beat me up and they took me to jail. And I slept for 3 days. Every night I had the same dream. On the 3rd day, I woke up to eat my food like normal, turned to go back to the bunk, and somebody put a Bible in the bars right above my bunk. And when I saw that Bible, I remembered the dream. And the dream was that there was a Bible open above my head, and it was calling my name. And the revelation I got was, God is who he says he is, and this book is true. And something on the inside of me that day changed. My whole worldview, my whole thought for living. It just, something on the inside of me shifted that day that I cannot explain. And I no longer wanted to be the gangbanger, drug addict, drug dealer, womanizing, murderous person that I had always been. This sought for power and fame. All of a sudden I was humbled, and I had come to this place where my heart had been transformed. And it was there that I need to know this God, because there was a freedom that I had experienced in that moment that is the greatest miracle that I've ever experienced ever. And it was there that I began to pursue him with all that I had. When I go to court, I talked to the judge, and the judge said, "How do you plead, sir?" And I told him, "I'm guilty as charged." And he just bust out laughing. And I really found favor in his sight. It was as if God turned his heart for my favor. And he let me go. And that was the first knowing that God is with me. God has began a work in me that I cannot deny. And so I am reading the Bible furiously. I am praying furiously. Something has happened in me that I can no longer be the same person anymore. I get out of jail. Me and my wife get married, and I start going to this church. And when I step into this church, it was like I was getting hit with electricity. I remember the song. The song was, "There's power in the name of Jesus. There's power in the blood of Jesus. There's power in the blood to break every chain." And I don't even know what was happening to me. All I know was I was overwhelmed with his goodness. And I knew from that day, God is not just something that I read in a book. He is someone to be encountered. And I began to encounter God. And through that encounter, I began to seek an encounter after encounter. I became almost addicted, infatuated with being in the presence of God, with just wanting to know him. I was so infatuated. But in that 2 years as well, I became very religious. I began to pursue something that God never called me to pursue. And that was platform, influence, leadership, those sort of things. We're all called to grow up, but my focus had changed. And that sent me into a season of this desert wilderness place for about 5 years. And there was just this streak of rebelliousness, this streak of anger in my life that no matter what I did, I couldn't run away from it. I didn't understand why. But here I am, married, trying to be a man, trying to be a father to my daughter, and trying to be a husband to my wife. And I have no idea, I have no modelship in front of me, have no one, there. I'm just trying to figure this thing out. And year after year, I leave my wife, I leave my daughter, I leave my family, because the pressure of life is too great. And the only thing I know to revert to is go and get high, go somewhere that feels good. And in my past, we got high for everything. Happy, sad, grievous, you name it, that's the reason why. It never dawned on me that I could have a demon. It never dawned on me that I was being controlled by something. I never thought that, I could be under the influence of something, because I never heard of it. I remember after 5 years of that, the Lord pursuing me, bringing me back, forgiving me, all of these things. And as I said, I had experienced the love of God that really, really transformed my life, but I was missing something. I was missing the fear of the Lord in my life. And about 5 years later, we go to an event. And at this event, they preach about what it means to be born again, what it means to really lay down one's life. And I really felt that God, he called me there to a renewing place, right? And so when I saw the revelation of what it really meant to be born again, it was there that God began to do a new work. He began to bring us out of this 5-year wilderness period. God began to just do a new thing in us like never before. And I slowly began to backpedal again to kind of revert back to my old ways, what was comfortable or whatever. And the Lord sent my wife a dream. And in the dream, Jeremy was going to live however he wants. And there was nothing anyone could do about it. And he thought that he was okay. When she woke up from the dream, the interpretation of the dream was, if Jeremy turns his heart from me again, we're done. I'm going to send him strong delusion. Like the children of Israel in the wilderness, they followed Moses, they did everything he told them to do, but in their heart they went astray. And if Jeremy turns his heart on me again, I'm going to send him strong delusion that he might believe the lie, that he's okay. And I remember seeing my wife come to from the dream, and she cried for 8 hours. It really shook us to the core. Like I didn't understand what was happening. And so after her 8 hours of crying, I'm thinking, what do we need to do to prevent this from happening? This is real. You know, it was just this surreal moment. And so we didn't know what to do. So what do? We started a fast. We fasted for 3 days. That night, I go to bed. I wake up at 2:22 in the middle of the night. This number is very significant. For years, I've been seeing the number 222, and I never could come to a conclusion of what it may mean. I had some ideas, read every verse 222 in the Bible, and never really come to a strong place. But when this event happened and we saw it was happening, we put in the address to that event that really began to transform our life in a new way. That event was literally 222 miles from our house. And so we searched where their Bible school was. It was in North Carolina. So we put in their address. Their address was literally 2 hours and 22 minutes from our home. So when I woke up at 2:22 in the middle of the night, I knew this was a map. I knew this was a sign that I should go to the school. We drove over to the school. They invited us in. They were having a small group. During that small group, they began to pray for my wife, and she began to manifest. And in a way, I've never seen her act before. And she got set free from a spirit of fear. I truly believe that. She was freaking out before we went in. And so that was kind of the initiation of praying for her first. And then they began to pray for me. And I just began to break and weep because I had so much hatred and so much anger and so much bitterness toward the church. I had all my bitterness and anger and murderous way of being that I had when I was in the world. When I got hurt by the church, I just blame shifted right to them. And so I just began to break. And the Lord brung this lady up to us, and she says, Jeremy, I don't know what you've been doing, but God says that if you, like the children of Israel, go astray in your heart again, that if you turn your back on me again, we're done. I'm going to send you strong delusion that you might believe the lie. Verbatim, word for word, the interpretation of the dream that Nicole had 3 days before. And I'm telling you that I felt the fear of God come upon me like a blanket. I could feel it. It was tangible. I found a strength. I found a safety in the fear of the Lord that I had never felt before. I knew without a shadow of a doubt, I do not have to sin. I do not have to succumb to this behavior anymore. I have the power to say no. And it stemmed from having a balance of the love of God and the fear of God. These two skyrocketed us right into Bible school, provisions, missionary trips. We've been all over the world. This was 5 years ago. It has transformed our life because of a revelation of the fear of the Lord. And it was from there that I never turned back again, never left my family again. It was something that we were lacking. And we've all experienced or heard about God so loved the world, but it's the fear of the Lord that God delights in. And so that was such a monumental moment in my life where rage and anger and hatred and all of these things, they melted away at the balance of who God is in a person. It's been beautiful. It's been beautiful. It really has transformed our life. So where does this leave you? The reality is that God, if He'll do it for one person, He'll do it for anyone. God is no respecter of person. And the freedom that I've experienced, I never thought was possible. God has truly brought a reality into our life that we're living from that is truly supernatural. I always saw myself and others as sinners saved by grace. I'm always going to struggle. I'm always going to, fall short. And those things have a level of truth, but the blood of Jesus paid a way for me not to just be forgiven in the sight of the Lord, but to also be pardoned, be set free from the bondage, the very nature of sin. And I've experienced that. I never thought that I could be free from pornography or lust or drugs or alcohol or cigarettes or any of those things. I thought that maybe I'll be better one day when Jesus comes back or something. But Jesus' blood paid away. It says that his blood is not like the blood of bulls and goats. The blood of bulls and goats could not cleanse the heart. It couldn't cleanse the conscience. It just appeased the Lord for another time until Messiah would come. But now that the blood of Jesus has come, it says, let us not trample the blood of Jesus like as if it's the blood of bulls and goats. For the blood of Jesus is able to cleanse the conscience, to purify the heart. And I've experienced a freedom in my life, a reality that I'm living from that is truly supernatural, that all of us can have. Literally, the word testimony means do it again, God. And so I know that if I can experience this freedom, so can you. If you're seeing this video and you're saying, wow, this is amazing. I wish my congregation knew this. I wish the brothers in this rehab knew this, or in this jail could see this guy's testimony. I will be so honored to come, to share, to impart the freedom that truly has been imparted to me. I'm extremely excited to see people's life transform, to live my life as an example that people say, I not only heard that you can be free, but I actually saw it. And now I know that if God did it for them, he can do it for me too.